What we thought we would do now is have a little bit of a discussion. We've got this distinguished panel here, and we're here talking about solving the digital divide. So we thought what we would do is have a conversation about both the complexities of bringing high-speed internet access to underserved and not served areas, as well as the massive opportunity that it represents. And what I would say to reinforce what we've been talking about all day long, the videos, really public-private partnerships have been critical to our strategy and our ability to help play our role in solving the digital divide. And in fact, there's a number of programs over the years. We've secured hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for this very purpose. You heard Alan and Steve talk about the NTIA grants and our success there. I can't stress enough, and Alan, we spent some time with, as Steve noted, really gets it. If you don't solve for the middle mile, forget talking about the last mile. There is no last mile without the middle mile. And it's, you know, if you ask the average American, they can probably at this point talk about the last mile. And the middle mile, we're fine to be the quiet enablers, but if you don't have highways, you don't have off-ramps. And that's really critical to solving this broader issue. So Alan, really appreciate not only the partnership, but understanding that critical piece. As you'll hear from Brian and some of the exciting things that were just announced recently, we've done a number of, well, we're doing more work. We'll talk probably about one of the big projects, but increasingly, to Alan's point, Brian and the state of Nevada really get it in terms of public-private partnerships. So Brian, I will, if I don't read it, I will butcher it, but the Nevada Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology has been a critical partner in our work here. The American Rescue Plan, ARPA funds, so we've also done a fair amount of this work with ARPA. And then increasingly, we are working with both local ISPs, and you'll hear some of that a little bit later, and communities utilizing infrastructure funding through the infrastructure bill. Our portion, of course, is BEAD, which stands for the Broadband Equity and Access Deployment Program. In fact, I think soon we'll be announcing a couple awards in another state, Joel, if I'm not mistaken, as those monies roll. And the beauty of this is, and you'll hear more about this, is for the largest independent provider of fiber optic networks in North America, we're able to use both our existing networks or our new networks, and we'll get into a little bit of detail on that to help solve this general problem and opportunity. The other thing is, I would just note, is Zayo for almost 20 years now, both through Zayo proper and through acquired companies, is the largest independent provider of internet services and other services through the federal E-rate program, the FCC's program. So you add all of these programs together and you start to see a picture of this is core to who we are, what we do. And the thing I would underscore is we're going to talk a lot about high-speed internet access. We're going to talk about homes passed and schools. But I want to underscore the point that when you build massive highways to these underserved or not served at all communities, it opens up just like, you know, to use Alan's analogy, just like the interstate highway system, it opens up a massive opportunity from an economic development standpoint. So our largest customers as Zayo, 3 categories. The hyperscalers, so the big, think Meta, AWS, Microsoft, the carriers who buy from us to be able to provide service, and then the aggregation of schools and government customers. And that's not an accident. As we build these large networks, then other economic development can flow from there. One of the biggest issues facing data centers today as they try to build out the AI revolution is power. There is limited power in metro areas. And so they need to go to underserved and not served networks. When you have these kinds of highways, you're able to do that much more effectively. Manufacturing, as we continue to industrialized North America, manufacturing in these areas is taking off, and it can happen when you have these caliber of networks where we can provide not only internet access, but we can also provide fiber and waves networks. So this is critically important, both to solve the digital divide and then to build the engine of economic development going forward. So I will stop talking. Why don't we go down the line, and if you could just do a brief introduction of yourself and your background so people know who's up on the stage. Sarah, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Andrés. I'm Sarah Bleau. I'm the director of the Middle Mile program here at NTIA. I've been with the NTIA for about 3 years. Prior to that, I spent my life in industry in the private sector. So happy to be here with NTIA, happy to be part of this groundbreaking ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Garry Gomes, founder of SkyFiber Internet. We've been around for about 22 years. Started in the microwave wireless industry, serving the underserved. We've been doing it for a long time. And it came from the need of, we knew people in the rural areas in Nevada had nothing. And there wasn't fiber there, and it wasn't going to come anytime soon. And we started on this journey to deliver it to these far out places in Nevada. And we've been doing it for over 20 years. Obviously, fiber is a better option, but it wasn't economically feasible.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Mitchell, the director of the Office of Science, Innovation, and Technology. It took me a long time to get that. I want to just take a moment to thank whichever legislative staff person who came up with that name. So, State Broadband Office. I'm the original director of the office. Been since the office was created in 2015. Have been with the state in this role as the broadband director.
I think you told us on the bus today you've served 4 different governors. Do I have that right?
4 governors. Yeah, I'm not sure how that happened, but here I am.
Says a lot about your staying power. All right, so let's start with the current landscape, Garry, and I'm actually going to build on your statement about the previous years and now. Could you describe some of the technical and financial barriers you face as an ISP when it comes to last mile connectivity?
Well, it's been a challenge. Obviously, we've done it with wireless initially because that was the only option. Technology advanced. We were able to deliver faster and faster speeds. Obviously, fiber hasn't been an option for a long time. You don't have, like what you guys are starting to build now, we didn't have options to just go to a POP somewhere and start building off it. The long-haul fiber that was built for years was very narcissistic and not forward-thinking. They were just thinking about where they're going and what they're doing and didn't have the foresight, I guess, at the time to know that this is going to keep building. We've seen it go from hardly anybody using the internet. It was like a novelty to it's a utility now. And so the challenges are still to be able to build the fiber to the rural areas without the government funding that's finally coming through now. And the way it's done from the state's level is phenomenal. Things are actually getting done. We've seen a lot of money go out for a lot of years, and it seems like nothing's been getting done in the rural areas. So we're excited.
Yeah, and we were talking privately, just, I think really, and not just because Brian is here, but Nevada, I think, is sort of a poster child for how to do what you're describing effectively. So, Brian, maybe you can elaborate on sort of the historical challenges here in Nevada of expanding broadband access equitably.
Sure. So when when COVID happened, everybody just dove in, and how do we keep kids in school? How do we help folks continue to be able to work, to be able to access health care, just to be able to keep in touch with family and friends. And we discovered really that in Nevada there were the networks that we had were just woefully inadequate for that. We had school districts that ultimately just had to go with paper and pencil, where they would, teachers would socially distance and get together and print out packets of paper and then drop them off, and kids would come and pick them up, and and it was paper. Yeah, huge stacks of paper, right? They were doing worksheets, and so. at the onset of this funding, we did a big needs assessment and analysis of the state, and discovered very quickly that middle mile was a huge need for us. We had a huge fiber desert in the state, and that ultimately, the BEAD funding and any of the last mile funding that was coming down the pike would be to little effect if we didn't have middle mile networks that were, that provided affordable and reliable upstream bandwidth to the folks who were building those last mile networks. So, we knew that we needed to have open access, available networks, that would provide that affordable bandwidth. And frankly, we went out and surveyed and spoke with all of the ISPs in the state, and asked them, why, what is stopping you from going and serving the unserved locations in this area or in this market, or what would stop you from expanding to a faster, more reliable service in this area? And the answer that we got from every single provider, almost verbatim, was either the fiber backhaul didn't exist or it was completely unaffordable. And so for us, we knew that middle mile had to be a big part of our solution. And today we're in the process of building a 2,500 mile middle mile network using a variety of funding sources. We've talked a little bit about how NTIA or Zayo was awarded 3 NTIA grants, and you might as well just start saying 4, because we've routed our NTIA middle mile grant to Zayo, and so Zayo is a part of building a huge chunk of that 2,500 mile middle mile network. I think the other challenge I'll just talk about a little bit is, for us, Nevada is every state likes to think they're unique, but in Nevada, maybe one thing that makes us unique is that we are 84% federal land. So you can't go anywhere without running into our friends at the federal government, the federal landowning agencies, and so that makes any project, just from a permitting perspective, extremely difficult. Our terrain is extremely rocky. We were talking to your folks today, and what they can do. They can do 10,000 feet. In the nice black rich soils of Iowa, and they can only do 1,000 or 2,000 feet here every day, right? So it's the expense and the and the time it takes to build networks out here in Nevada and in the West generally is a really big challenge for us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you mentioned that. So for the audience, you've heard us talk about the 3 NTIA grants that we were awarded. Working very closely with Brian and the state, we were recently awarded the Nevada Middle Mile Program, which, if you're not familiar with that, that'll be 2 routes. One from Reno to, what's the D-mark on the I-80?
Wells.
Yes, on a very rural area, but in high demand, actually. It turns out our biggest customer is going to build a massive telescope there, a series of telescopes. And then a route along the state 93, right? Which, to Brian's point, was funded through the NTIA and state funds. So again, all of this builds on itself. The I-80 route will ultimately connect with the NTIA route that we celebrated today in the groundbreaking. So each of these projects gives life to the next project and builds on it from an access and from an economic development standpoint. So Sarah, you noted you've been with the NTIA for 3 years. Maybe you can share some of the factors that you've seen that reinforce the need for greater federal assistance as well on this challenging problem and opportunity.
Sure. I'd actually start with, prior to being part of the NTIA, my 20 years with industry and learning how to build business cases and figure out, does it cost justify adding distribution to Mountain City, Nevada, for example, or breaking out to building to these very small rural communities. So I understand you need to make money when you're in industry, when you're in a business, and you don't have that federal assistance. And it's always been a problem. You've always had to do that. I think that the pandemic actually put this dichotomy front and center, And all of a sudden, we realized if you didn't have access to high-speed internet, your life was really limited to what you had immediately in front of you. Your job opportunities were right in front of you. Your kids had the education that was right there in your neighborhood. Your doctor visits, if you have a good doctor in your town, then great. But if you didn't, then you were in trouble. And really, that makes life inequitable digitally compared to those of us who live in more urban areas. Myself living in Denver, where I have access to gigs download speeds for 5, 6, 7 cents a meg, you don't have access to that when you don't have access to high-speed internet. And so I see with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the federal government stepped in to help industry make those business cases, to help you justify the cost to build out to these places so that life can be more equitable for all. And get to the goal, like Alan was mentioning earlier, of high-speed and affordable internet for all Americans.
Yeah, thank you. And I mean, it goes without saying, but I'll say it because it's taken us collectively as a society to figure out that if you don't have a robust partnership between the last mile providers, the middle mile providers, state and local government, it's impossible to make these business cases work financially. But with a little bit of investment, we can create so much more return on that investment through the partnership. So we couldn't agree more, and that's why we're so heavily invested in state and federal partnerships. One of the things, as BEAD dollars, again, the infrastructure program is primarily, most of you know because you're from the industry, it's primarily a last mile project. But again, to my point, there is no last mile if there's no middle mile. So what is it, Joel? We anticipate about 20% of BEAD dollars, 15% will ultimately go to middle mile providers to enable that partnership. And in fact, under Joel's leadership, we have a very robust partnership with ISPs. I think we even have a fancy name for it, Joel, right? What is it? The Broadband Infrastructure Deployment Alliance, the ZBETA. Leave it? Oh, yeah? Oh, I thought it was the fancy marketing people who helped us come up with that. So what we're doing with the ZBETA program is Joel and his team are out actively building the partnerships before the grants are even available, so that when we collectively go in, we can make the case for not just the last mile, but the full. And so, Garry, I want to ask you, first of all, SkyFiber just received a $27 million grant. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Not just, it's been a little while.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit more about that project?
Well, I heard you mention you were 3 for 3. Well, we were 2 for 2, so.
Awesome.
Pretty
We only
excited
hang
about
with
that.
winners, Garry. We only hang with winners.
We went into it, there was 10 regions, and a lot of people were looking at, let's go after a lot of regions, and we looked at the regions that we're most familiar with, that we've been deploying our type of network for many years and have a lot of customers in, so we focused on those two, thinking, how great would it be if we could build fiber right where we've been deploying this wireless forever and eventually bring fiber to our clients instead of the wireless. So, yeah, we were super excited. We approached it differently, apparently. We hadn't forayed into this before, so we ended up picking a contractor and an engineering firm and getting hard money bids for everything up front. So we approached it, eyes wide open, this is what it's going to take, and went at it. And we thought we had maybe a 10% chance to win one. And apparently we did something right. So, yeah, we're excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. That's actually, the Nevada Middle Mile grant. We did something very similar. I was working closely with Brian and his team. We figured out what would it take, and then they figured out how to fund it so that we could do a turnkey solution and just do it with one contractor, one partnership.
Well, being in this industry, it's fairly new for us. I have electrical contractor background. I've been in construction my whole life. And it was shocking to me that a lot of companies would go after a project and pretty much guess. Yeah. And then sometimes projects never got finished because they couldn't do it for the price they said. And I was flabbergasted by that.
Zayo may or may have not done that once or twice in the past. Not recently, but once or twice. But we did finish with going and asking our investors for more dollars. Brian, anything more you want to add about the Nevada Middle Mile project, or how you're leveraging ARPA funds or NTIA funds?
Yeah, sure. So, I think where we started from was, we knew that we needed to get more fiber into communities to prepare for BEAD, so that there were opportunities, for a variety, as many as possible, a wide variety of different last mile providers to come in and being able to bid on these networks, being able to have the opportunity to serve, the most unserved areas. And so we started off by identifying about 250 state and local or state government facilities that were unserved or underserved. And then we added on schools and libraries to that list. And then we went to local governments and said, do you want to add your facilities to our bid list? And ended up bidding out about 1,000 facilities total statewide. And we're serving about 500 of them. Ultimately, when the bids came in, we were going to end up serving about 500 of them. And our idea was, these networks need to be sustainable, and they also need to be, there's got to be a reason to build them. And so the state government facilities and the schools and libraries, act really as almost anchor tenants in a community for, for this initial. These initial fiber builds to come into a community, and then we can branch off of there with the last mile funds as they come up. The other thing that focusing on community anchor institutions allowed us to do is to leverage other funding sources like ARPA, the Capital Projects Fund, the E-rate funding and whatnot. And so, people often say, okay, well, which funding source is funding this project? And in reality, we're just kind of cobbling together and braiding together lots of different funding sources in a way that will maximize, what each funding source is good at, and, and stretching those dollars. I mean, you mentioned that, BEAD funds are going to end up covering, 15% of BEAD funds are going to be spent on middle mile. And as a state where, and I haven't been shy about saying this, I don't think the federal funding formula for BEAD did Western states any favors. And I think we got less than our fair share. And, and there are a lot of East Coast states that are going to have hundreds of millions of dollars in leftover BEAD money, whereas Nevada, we won't have enough to reach every single household with fiber. And so, we need to, be as parsimonious and as careful as we can with the funding that we have in order to make sure that every Nevadan gets connected. And so part of that is leveraging as many funding sources as we can.
And Garry, you guys are beneficiaries of this recently announced award. Maybe you can elaborate on how you're participating in the Nevada Middle Mile program that Brian's talking about.
Yeah, so we ended up, we're building about 150 miles of fiber, and it's going very rural Nevada. Smith Valley through Urington into Silver Springs, down 50 into Carson, and then up into Virginia City on 6 Mile Canyon Road. So it's a pretty big build, and it's covering a lot of, like I said, a lot of areas. Not only we're covering with our technology currently, but other wireless companies are too. So it's huge for the community.
That's great. So I actually want to build on something you said earlier about, I think you said the long-haul providers were narcissistic in building their networks before. So I want to double-click a little bit on, again, we've got a great marketing department, so they've come up with the Digital Equity Access Network, which is our architecture for making this all profitable. So in addition to pre-provisioning fiber and working out competitive pricing up front, there's actually some work doing to make sure that there are multiple interconnection points and the technology is set up. Maybe, Garry, you can just help us understand, for those of us who aren't technical, why that makes a huge difference when you're trying to build laterals off ours or other middle mile providers.
Well, I can give you an example, and it's actually Zayo, and this was many years ago, but we found David Peisner's here. He's outside sales with us, and he was looking for fiber in a very rural area of Nevada, and he finally found one of the markers that said Zayo on it. So we got a hold of Zayo, And we asked them how much it would cost to break it out, and it was about $1 million. So that's kind of what you've run into in the past. They weren't really built to distribute internet to small communities.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's such a big difference what's happening now. It's going to blow up. And I think what's been talked about tonight is right. This is a generational thing. This is going to change it. And making living in the rural communities so much better. It's, as everybody knows here, if your internet goes down, it's like everything stops. People literally don't know what to do. Now, I think people should go outside a little more, maybe hike, go biking, but, you know, we do need the internet for almost every aspect of our life anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's like almost everything. It's much more cost-effective to invest up front than to try to do it after the fact. So when you go, and the reason it's $1 million, you got to splice it all, you got to break it all up, and it's a much more expensive endeavor than if the network is built to anticipate, which is
Forward thinking.
which is exactly what we're using.
And funding.
Yeah, I don't know where Alan went. Maybe he had to go, but that's exactly what we're using NTIA dollars for, as Sarah knows very well, is on these long-haul networks is pre-provisioning the interconnections to make it accessible. Sarah, maybe we'll give you the last word. So looking at the deployment of middle mile infrastructure across various states, how do you measure the long-term success of these types of projects and programs?
My dream is that, and I looked it up, Mountain City, Nevada is on the 4th Zayo project, since Brian mentioned that. And it's I think it's maybe the 12th least populated, at least according to the report that I saw, 12th least populated town in Nevada. And when I looked at the FCC report of unserved, it's all red. Not a lot, because there's not a lot of people, but it's a very rural, remote place. And it's on that stretch that goes then on down to Vegas. And my dream, what success looks like to me, is that because you're building fiber to these places, because you're making public where that fiber is located. You don't have to, like, I'm not going to have to just go walking down the street and look for manhole covers in order to figure out that it's Zayo. We're putting your maps on the website. We're going to tell people where the interconnects are. You're going to have your publicly posted interconnect policy available. And the people who live, and Gary's going to be able to connect to your ILA or distribution site, whatever you want to call it, in Mountain City, and he's going to have access to that 400 gig wave as if Mountain City is just like a virtual Las Vegas. He's going to have it. The federally assisted programs are going to offer a lower OpEx for service providers like Zayo, so that Gary is going to be able to buy that 400 gig wave from Vegas as if he were in Vegas, and he's going to be able to distribute to the people in Mountain City. And that is my dream, that people who live in Mountain City, Nevada, buy internet at the same pennies per meg is what I'm looking for, that people in Las Vegas are paying for internet. That's what success is.
Amen. Amen.
And that's literally with like milliseconds difference. It's like being in Vegas. You're talking what, 2 milliseconds maybe, if that?
Look, I want to thank all of our panelists for coming out, for prioritizing this event. I also want to thank, this kind of massive effort takes a lot of support, a lot of backers. Many of you in this room are part of that, so we want to thank all of you for coming out. We specifically, as it relates to the NTIA, want to thank some very important federal officials, including Senator Rosen, Senator Cortez Masto and their offices, the governor's office here in Nevada, and then representatives who are here from the offices of federal officials from California and from Oregon. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for your support in this really important effort. As Alan said, as Sarah reinforced, to really build the next major infrastructure program that will define this generation. So thank you.